A boxing champion humiliates an elderly janitor at a legendary Chicago gym, forcing the 72-year-old Korean War veteran to his knees while cameras roll for social media. The heavyweight bully and his crew laugh as they make the old soldier scrub the floor like a servant, calling him worthless in front of everyone. But the quiet martial arts instructor watching from upstairs isn't just another gym member. This is Donnie in himself. The champion has no idea he just degraded a war hero in front of a man who spent decades perfecting the deadliest fighting system on Earth. While the arrogant fighter poses for more humiliating videos, the Wing Chun master descends the stairs with lethal calm. The old janitor recognizes his defender and steps back, knowing justice is about to be delivered with surgical precision. The bully's entourage keeps filming, thinking they're capturing more content, but they're actually recording their champion's education in true martial arts. What happens when you disrespect a veteran in front of a living legend? Will the heavyweight survive learning why some movie stars earned their reputation in real combat? What happened next would shatter the champion's arrogance forever. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn broke gray and cold over Chicago's South Side as Eddie Kowalski turned his key in the weathered lock of the Golden Gloves boxing gym. At 72, his hands moved with the same steady precision they'd shown for 15 years of opening this place, arthritis be damned. The familiar creak of the heavy door welcomed him into the cathedral of sweat and dreams he'd come to love more than his own cramped apartment. 5:30 sharp, same as always. Eddie flicked on the overhead lights, watching fluorescent tubes stutter to life above rows of heavy bags that hung like leather sentinels. The smell hit him, that mixture of leather, sweat, and determination that never quite left these walls. Good smells. Honest smells. He moved through his morning ritual with practiced efficiency, checking the ring ropes for fraying, testing equipment for loose bolts, running a weathered mop across canvas that had seen 1,000 dreams born and broken. This place had history. Real history. Not like the flashy corporate gyms sprouting up across the city with their mirrors and smoothie bars. Eddie paused before the wall of photographs, black and white memories of champions who'd trained here when boxing meant something. His eyes found the small, faded picture tucked between legends. Himself at 24 in perfect fighting stance. Golden Gloves amateur champion, 1952. Different world then. Different man. The coffee maker gurgled to life as Mickey Torino pushed through the door, bringing October cold and the scent of cheap aftershave. 68 years old and still moving like the bantamweight he'd been. Morning, Eddie. Jennifer. Doing good up at Northwestern. Dean's List again. Pride warmed Eddie's voice. His granddaughter, the nurse-to-be. Worth every aching morning, every humble paycheck. Smart as her grandmother. God rest her soul. Mickey nodded, understanding. 3 years since Martha passed, and the old Korean War vet still worked this job to pay tuition bills that would have broken younger men. Honor wasn't dead in everyone. Through the front window, expensive cars began gathering like vultures. Eddie's shoulders tightened imperceptibly as he watched the new generation arrive, all flash and noise and disrespect. His weathered hands gripped the mop handle tighter. The real work was about to begin. The convoy arrived like an invasion. 3 black SUVs and a Ferrari the color of fresh blood. Eddie watched from the window as Marcus, the Hammer, Kellerman emerged. From the red car, designer workout gear stretched across a frame that had never known real hardship. 28 years old and already heavyweight champion of the world. 23 fights, 23 knockouts, 0 lessons in humility. His entourage spilled out behind him like a small army. Larry Goldstein, the manager, barking orders. Into his phone, Pete Sullivan, the trainer, carrying equipment worth more than Eddie's monthly salary. Crystal Adams, the social media manager, already filming everything with her phone, turning every moment into content for the machine that fed on attention. 2 bodyguards flanked Kellerman as he strode toward the gym's entrance, moving like he owned not just the building but the very air inside it. In 6 weeks, he'd defend his title against Roberto Valdez, a veteran who'd earned his shot the hard way. But respect for opponents wasn't part of the modern game. Clear some space, Gramps. One of the bodyguards said as Eddie held the door open. Not a thank you. not even eye contact. Just the casual dismissal reserved for people who didn't matter in their world. Kellerman's team swept through the gym like locusts, rearranging equipment without asking, claiming the best training areas as their birthright. Crystal documented everything, creating the illusion of authenticity for followers who'd never set foot in a real gym. "This lighting is perfect," she announced, positioning her camera near the heavy bags. "We can get some great shots of Marcus looking all gritty. And working class." Working class. Eddie almost smiled at that. This kid probably spent more on his shoes than most working people made in a month. Real working class men built their bodies in places like this after 10-hour shifts, not because cameras were watching. Kellerman shadowboxed for the lenses, his movements sharp and powerful, but lacking the poetry Eddie remembered from the old champions. Technique without soul, power without purpose. The sport had given him everything, but he'd given nothing back except arrogance. The champion's eyes swept the gym and found Eddie in the corner, quietly organizing his cleaning supplies. For a moment, their gazes met, the old janitor and the young king. Kellerman's expression showed exactly what he thought of men like Eddie. "Hope the help knows to stay out of the way," Kellerman told his trainer, loud enough for Eddie to hear. "We've got real work to do." 2 floors above the boxing circus, Danny Chin moved through his morning preparation with the fluid grace of a man who'd spent decades perfecting economy of motion. At 52, he appeared younger, or perhaps timeless, his movements carrying the effortless precision that marked true martial arts mastery. The small studio space he rented above the Golden Gloves gym had become his sanctuary, a place where Wing Chun's ancient principles lived on in a world increasingly obsessed with flash over substance. 7 students filtered in for the morning class, each drawn here by something deeper than the desire to simply fight. Tommy Rodriguez, 16, and burning with the awkward energy of youth, seeking discipline his single mother couldn't provide. Janet Kim, 35, an office worker tired of feeling powerless in a world that seemed designed to diminish people. Harold Washington, 64, a retired teacher who discovered that learning never truly ended. "Wing Chun is not about defeating others," Danny said as they began their forms, his voice carrying the gentle authority of someone who'd learned these lessons the hard way. "It's about understanding yourself, respecting others, and finding balance in an unbalanced world." Through the studio's large window, Danny could see down into the main gym where Kellerman's team had transformed the space into their personal stage. The contrast struck him immediately. Upstairs, 8 people working together with respect and patience. Downstairs, 20 people serving one man, someone getting pushed around. Tommy answered, anger coloring his voice. "I see someone who knows his own worth regardless of how others treat him," Harold said quietly. "That's real strength." Danny nodded, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. As Kellerman's voice carried up from below, another dismissive comment, another casual cruelty. His students continued their practice, but Danny's attention remained fixed on the window, watching dignity under assault. Some lessons, he thought, required different kinds of teaching. 3 days later, the disrespect had metastasized into something uglier. Eddie arrived Wednesday morning to find equipment scattered across the gym floor like debris after a storm. Heavy bags left unhooked, weights dumped carelessly, towels dropped wherever Kellerman's team had finished with them. The cleanup would take an extra hour, time Eddie didn't have with his granddaughter calling that night to discuss her upcoming finals. That he worked methodically, his movements economical despite the arthritis that spoke up more loudly each morning. 15 years of this job had taught him patience, but the casual disregard stung more than his pride wanted to admit. These weren't accidents. This was territory marking, a deliberate message about who mattered and who didn't. Kellerman arrived early with just his trainer Pete, the rest of his circus mercifully absent. The champion moved to the heavy bag without acknowledgement, beginning his workout, while Eddie continued cleaning around him. The rhythm of gloves against leather filled the space. Powerful, precise, but somehow hollow. "Move that shit," Kellerman said without looking up as Eddie approached with his cleaning supplies. "Crystal's coming to film, and we can't have janitor stuff in the shot." Eddie paused, bucket in hand. The area needed cleaning. Someone had spilled protein powder across a wide section of floor, leaving a sticky mess that would attract dirt all day. But the champion's tone left no room for explanation. I just need to. Did I stutter? Kellerman's voice sharpened, carrying the edge of a man accustomed to immediate obedience. Move. Your shit. Other gym members had begun filtering in for their morning workouts. Mickey, Frank Kowalski, Jimmy D'Angelo, men who'd known Eddie for years. They watched the exchange with uncomfortable silence, caught between respect for the old veteran and awareness of the celebrity who paid more in monthly fees than some of them made in half a year. Eddie moved his supplies to the corner, the small retreat burning like acid in his throat. Kellerman returned to his bag work, each punch a little harder than necessary, marking his dominance over the space and everyone in it. Above them, Danny finished his meditation and headed downstairs to use the restroom. The timing was unfortunate, or perhaps fate. He emerged from the hallway just as Kellerman was making another demand, his voice carrying the casual cruelty of someone who'd never learned that strength and bullying weren't the same thing. Their eyes met across the gym floor, the quiet martial arts instructor and the arrogant champion. Kellerman's gaze was challenging, dismissive, already calculating whether this small Asian man represented another obstacle to brush aside. Danny said nothing, but his hands slowly clenched into fists as he watched a war hero accept humiliation. From a boy who'd never faced real adversity, the real fight was beginning. Friday afternoon brought the full circus. ESPN cameras crowded the Golden Gloves gym alongside Kellerman's regular entourage, transforming the sacred space into a television studio. Sports reporters with perfect hair and expensive suits documented the champion's authentic training environment, while carefully avoiding shots of the gym's weathered corners. Crystal orchestrated the chaos like a conductor, positioning cameras to capture Kellerman's manufactured authenticity. "We need gritty," she announced to her crew. "Real gym atmosphere, but make sure the lighting flatters Marcus." Eddie worked around the maze of equipment and egos, trying to maintain the gym's cleanliness while television crews trampled across freshly mopped floors. The protein powder spill near the ring had spread, someone's careless footstep grinding the sticky mess deeper into the canvas. "Perfect timing," Crystal said, spotting Eddie approaching with his cleaning supplies. "Marcus, this could be great content." The champion training while the real gym life happens around him. Kellerman's eyes lit up with the particular gleam of someone who discovered a new toy. "Yeah, let's show them how a real champion handles his environment." The cameras rolled as Eddie knelt beside the ring, scrubbing the protein powder stain. What started as background footage quickly became the focus as Kellerman positioned himself above the old man, delivering lines about dedication and working around obstacles. "This is what separates champions from wannabes," Kellerman told the cameras, his voice projecting confidence while Eddie worked silently below, adapting to any environment, staying focused no matter what distractions surround you. The humiliation escalated gradually, each comment pushing further. Kellerman suggested Eddie clean more thoroughly for the cameras, then demanded he scrub a wider area. The old veteran complied with quiet dignity, but his shoulders carried the weight of every dismissive word. "Stay down there where you belong, old man," Kellerman finally said, his voice carrying to every corner of the gym. "This is a young man's world now." The silence that followed was deafening. Mickey's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. The ESPN reporters shifted uncomfortably. Even Crystal's phone wavered as she recorded the moment that crossed from content into cruelty. Above them, Danny watched through the studio window, his meditation beads snapping between his fingers. The cameras packed away, the reporters departed, and the gym gradually emptied as evening settled over the south side. Kellerman remained with just Pete and a few hangers-on, working through his final training session of the day. The rhythm of gloves against leather echoed in the nearly empty space. Harder now, more aggressive, as if the afternoon's performance had awakened something darker in the champion. Eddie finished his cleaning in mechanical silence, his movements precise despite the humiliation still burning in his chest. 72 years old, Korean War veteran, Golden Gloves champion, reduced to entertainment for social media. But Jennifer needed her tuition, and jobs weren't easy to find at his age. Mickey approached quietly, his weathered face tight with anger. "Eddie, that was wrong. Dead wrong." "It's fine, Mickey." Eddie's voice carried the weariness of a man whose laughter erupted from Kellerman's corner. Genuine, dismissive amusement. Are you serious? Who the hell are you to tell me anything? Someone who believes in treating people with respect. Listen, Grandpa. Kellerman stepped closer, using his size to intimidate. This is my gym. I pay more in a month than you probably make in a year. The old man works for me, understand? He does what I tell him. Danny's expression never changed, but something shifted in his posture, subtle, almost imperceptible, like a blade being unsheathed in darkness. He's a veteran. He deserves your respect, not your cruelty. Respect. Kellerman's voice rose, attracting attention from the few remaining gym members. You want to talk about respect? Put on some gloves, old man. Otherwise, mind your own damn business. The challenge hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Danny looked at the arrogant champion, then at Eddie watching from across the gym. Tomorrow evening, after closing, Saturday morning arrived with the weight of unfinished business. Word of the challenge had spread through the boxing community's underground network. Barbershops, corner stores, late-night calls between old-timers who remembered when fighters settled disputes with honor. Instead of lawyers, Eddie found Danny already in his studio, moving through forms with mechanical precision. The old veteran climbed the stairs slowly, his knees protesting each step, carrying 2 cups of coffee and the burden of guilt. This is my fault, Eddie said, offering Danny a cup. I should have stood up for myself. No, Danny's voice was firm, but gentle. This is about something bigger than one moment. It's about what kind of men we choose to be. They sat together on the studio's small bench, 2 warriors from different wars sharing the silence of understanding. Through their conversation, Eddie learned about Danny's wife Maria, the car accident 5 years ago, the guilt that drove him from the spotlight into this quiet corner of the world. Why risk this for me? Eddie asked. Because someone has to. Because if good men do nothing, bullies inherit the earth. Downstairs, Kellerman's team prepared for what they expected would be easy entertainment. Crystal tested camera angles while Larry worked his phone, already planning how to monetize the footage. Pete worried about liability, but his concerns were drowned out by Kellerman's confidence. This is perfect, the champion told his entourage. Some old karate guy thinks he can mess with me? We'll make him famous for all the wrong reasons. As evening approached, the gym began filling with an unusual crowd. Danny's martial arts students arrived to support their teacher. Boxing old-timers came to witness what might be the last stand of respect in their sport. Young people with phones appeared, drawn by social media buzz promising viral content. Eddie helped Danny prepare, wrapping his hands with care learned from decades around fighters. The ritual was sacred, cloth and tape transforming hands into weapons, but also binding them to principles larger than violence. You sure about this? Eddie asked, pulling the final wrap tight. Danny flexed his fingers, testing the bindings. Outside, car doors slammed as more spectators arrived. Some things are worth fighting for, Eddie. Your dignity. The right way to treat people. If I don't stand up now, who will? The sun set over Chicago, painting the gym's windows red as destiny gathered in the shadows. 7 o'clock arrived with electric tension. The Golden Gloves gym had never seen a crowd like this, packed beyond capacity with an unlikely mixture of martial arts students, boxing veterans, social media influencers, and curiosity seekers drawn by word of mouth about the strangest fight in Chicago history. Kellerman entered like a conquering hero, his red Ferrari pulling up to flashbulbs from phones and cameras. His full entourage surrounded him, manager, trainer, bodyguards, and Crystal documenting every moment for the content machine. He wore custom shorts with his name embroidered in gold, moving with the swagger of a man who'd never faced real adversity. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Danny sat quietly in his corner with only Eddie beside him, wearing simple black shorts and hand wraps that had seen better days. No entourage, no cameras, no ceremony. Just a man preparing to stand up for principles that seemed increasingly extinct. Bobby Chun, the longtime gym member and former referee, volunteered to officiate. His presence lent legitimacy to what could have been a circus, establishing rules that would keep things fair. Gentlemen, I want a clean fight, Bobby announced as the crowd pressed closer to the ring. Touch gloves and hold on. Mickey's voice cut through the noise from ringside. At 78, The old bantamweight had seen every fighter worth remembering. His weathered eyes studied Danny's calm preparation, something familiar tugging. At his memory, the recognition hit like lightning. Mickey's whispered words spread through the older spectators like wildfire. Jesus Christ, that's Donnie Yen. The name rippled through the crowd in waves. Disbelief, excitement, fear, emotions crashed together as people realized what they were witnessing. Danny's students beamed with pride while Kellerman's team exchanged uncertain glances. But Kellerman himself remained oblivious, too focused on his own legend to recognize another's. He shadowboxed confidently, already planning his victory speech. For the cameras, "Ready, gentlemen?" Bobby asked, raising his hand. Danny and Kellerman approached center ring. The champion extended his glove with condescending confidence, expecting the traditional touch before his inevitable dominance. "Hope you've got good insurance, Grandpa." Kellerman smirked. Danny met his eyes with perfect calm. Everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were yesterday. The bell rang, echoing through the packed gym like the sound of fate being sealed. The bell's echo died into electric silence. Kellerman exploded forward like a freight train, throwing massive hooks designed to end fights in seconds. His strategy was simple. Overwhelming power delivered fast enough to prevent his opponent from thinking, let alone responding. But every punch met empty air. Danny moved like water around stone, his footwork so economical it seemed effortless. Classical Wing Chun principles guided every step: centerline theory, economy of motion, using the opponent's force against them. Kellerman's haymakers whistled past Danny's head by inches, the champion's growing frustration evident in his increasingly wild swings. "What the hell?" Kellerman muttered, resetting his stance. No opponent had ever made him look this foolish, especially not some old man who barely came up to his shoulders. The crowd watched in mesmerized silence as Danny demonstrated 40 years of martial arts mastery. Each evasion was poetry, a subtle lean here, a half step there, movements so precise they seemed choreographed yet completely spontaneous. Kellerman's power shots, devastating. Enough to drop professional heavyweights, couldn't connect with a target that seemed to exist in a different dimension of space and time. Pete shouted instructions from Kellerman's corner, but pride prevented the champion from listening. This was supposed to be easy. This was supposed to be content. Instead, he was being made to look like an amateur in front of cameras and witnesses. "Stand still and fight," Kellerman roared, launching a combination that would have decapitated a lesser opponent. Danny's response was a gentle sidestep that left Kellerman punching air, stumbling forward from his own momentum. The champion's balance wavered. For just a moment, he was completely vulnerable. Danny could have ended it then with a simple push, but instead he waited, allowing Kellerman to recover his footing. The message was clear. This wasn't about destruction, but education. As the round progressed, even Kellerman's entourage began to understand they were witnessing something unprecedented. Crystal's phone captured every moment, but her usual commentary had fallen silent. The footage would go viral, but not for the reasons anyone expected. The bell saved Kellerman from further embarrassment, but as he returned to his corner, sweat already streaming down his face, the terrible truth began to dawn that he was completely outclassed. "What the hell is happening out there?" Larry demanded as Pete worked frantically on Kellerman between rounds. The manager's confidence had evaporated, replaced by the panic of someone watching a sure thing collapse in real time. "He's not fighting back," Pete said, trying to make sense of what they'd witnessed. "It's like he's playing with you." Kellerman's chest heaved as he struggled to process the humiliation. 23 professional fights, 23 victories. And now some gym teacher was making him look like a novice. The crowd's murmur had shifted from anticipation to awe. They weren't watching a fight anymore, but a master class in defensive artistry. Round 2 began with Kellerman attempting strategy. Over fury, he used his jab, working behind his reach advantage, trying to establish distance and control. But Danny's defensive skills transcended simple boxing. This was 40 years of Wing Chun sensitivity training, reading intentions through micro-movements, responding to attacks before they fully formed. Danny began his counteroffensive with surgical precision. Light strikes that stung without seeking damage. A palm to the chest demonstrating centerline theory. A redirected punch showing the futility of force meeting force. Each technique carried a lesson about respect, timing, and the difference between fighting and bullying. The crowd began to appreciate what they were seeing. Danny's students cheered as they recognized techniques from their classes applied at the highest level. Even longtime boxing fans found themselves drawn into the poetry of perfect defense married to controlled offense. "He's teaching him," Harold Washington whispered to Mickey. The retired teacher recognized the pedagogical approach, correction, through demonstration rather than destruction. Kellerman landed a few shots as the round progressed, but only when Danny allowed it. Rewards for proper technique, acknowledgement when the champion fought with skill rather than rage. The psychological impact was devastating. Kellerman realized his opponent could have finished him at any moment, but chose restraint instead. Crystal stopped filming entirely, her phone lowering as she watched her champion being systematically dismantled by someone who treated violence as philosophy. The social media content she'd planned was evolving into something she didn't understand. The second round ended with Kellerman no longer angry, but confused, facing the terrible possibility that everything he believed about strength and dominance was wrong. Danny returned to his corner unmarked, while Kellerman bore the light bruises of a man being educated. Round 3 opened with desperation disguised as strategy. Kellerman attempted to clinch, using his size and weight to control Danny in close quarters. But Wing Chun had been developed specifically for close-range combat. Every attempt to tie up or muscle Danny around failed as leverage and technique trumped brute strength. Danny's offense evolved into something magnificent and terrifying. Still restraining himself from real damage, he began demonstrating the full spectrum of his art. A trap and counter sequence showed Kellerman how easily his punches could be redirected. A sweep illustrated the importance of balance and timing. Each technique was a sentence in a conversation about the nature of true strength. The strikes didn't hurt so much as they communicated. A palm strike to the chest moved Kellerman backward. While teaching centerline theory, a deflected punch demonstrated why meeting force with force was futile. The champion found himself being repositioned, controlled, and educated simultaneously. "My God," Mickey whispered from ringside. "He's giving him a private lesson in front of everyone." The crowd had gone silent, understanding they were witnessing something beyond entertainment. This wasn't brutality masked as sport. This was martial arts in its purest form, where the goal was enlightenment rather than destruction. Kellerman began to panic as he realized the full scope of his helplessness. Every technique he'd mastered, every combination that had destroyed professional opponents, proved useless against someone who seemed to exist in a different dimension of combat. Danny wasn't just superior. He was operating on a level Kellerman couldn't even comprehend. "What are you?" Kellerman gasped during a brief separation. Danny's response was a gentle nod of acknowledgement. The question showed understanding was beginning to dawn. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about showing a bully what real strength looked like. As the round progressed, even Kellerman's corner fell silent. Pete had stopped shouting instructions. Larry had stopped calculating damage control, and Crystal had lowered her phone entirely. They were watching their champion discover that everything he believed about power was an illusion. The bell rang, but this time Kellerman didn't return to his corner with anger or confusion. For the first time in his professional career, he felt something approaching humility. He was being granted an education in respect, and the teacher was showing infinite patience. Round 4 began with a transformed fighter. Kellerman emerged from his corner, showing something he'd never displayed before: genuine respect for his opponent and the art being demonstrated. His approach became measured, technical, actually listening to Pete's corner advice for the first time in years. Danny acknowledged this evolution with subtle nods, allowing the round to become more competitive. When Kellerman used proper boxing fundamentals instead of relying on power alone, Danny permitted clean exchanges. When the champion showed real technique, he was rewarded with opportunities to work. The crowd witnessed a remarkable transformation. Kellerman began fighting like the skilled boxer his record suggested rather than the brutish bully his behavior had revealed. His jab found rhythm, his footwork improved, his combinations showed actual craft instead of raw aggression. For the first time in the fight, both men were boxing, not one teaching while the other flailed, but two skilled fighters showing mutual respect through their craft. Danny's defensive mastery remained absolute. but he now engaged more fully, showing Kellerman what combat could be when honor-guided technique. "Look at that," Eddie said quietly from Danny's corner. "He's actually learning." The psychological shift was profound. Kellerman no longer fought from arrogance, but from genuine effort to match the standard being set. His success came not from power, but from proper execution, rewards for fighting the right way rather than the easy way. Even Kellerman's team began to understand what they were witnessing. Pete nodded approvingly as his fighters showed skills that had been buried under ego and bad habits. Larry stopped calculating damage control and started appreciating the artistry. Crystal found herself filming again, but with reverence rather than exploitation. The round evolved into a beautiful display of two different fighting philosophies finding common ground. Danny's Wing Chun principles merged seamlessly with Kellerman's boxing fundamentals when both were executed with respect and precision. As the bell rang, both fighters touched gloves voluntarily, a gesture of mutual acknowledgement that hadn't been planned or prompted. The crowd erupted in appreciation for both men, understanding they'd witnessed something special. Kellerman returned to his corner not defeated but enlightened, finally beginning to understand the difference between fighting and combat, between strength and power, between winning and succeeding. The real education was just beginning. Round 5 began with both fighters showing transformed mutual respect. Kellerman boxed with newfound intelligence while Danny continued his measured demonstration of martial arts philosophy. The crowd sensed they were watching the natural conclusion of something beautiful. Two warriors finding understanding through controlled combat. But old habits die hard, especially when pride is threatened. As the round progressed toward what seemed like a respectful finish, Kellerman's conditioning began to fail. Despite his improved technique, he was losing every exchange to a man 24 years older. The realization that he was being outclassed by someone who could be his father ignited the arrogance that had always defined him. During a natural break in action, both fighters stepped back, breathing hard. Danny lowered his guard slightly in a gesture of acknowledgement. The fight had served its purpose. Both men had shown their skills, and honor could be preserved with a respectful conclusion. Kellerman appeared to mirror the gesture, lowering his own gloves and nodding toward Danny. The crowd began to relax, appreciating the sportsmanship being displayed. Even the old-timers nodded approval at what seemed like a proper ending to an unusual contest. But Danny's guard dropped only because he'd misread character for technique improvement. Kellerman's right hand exploded upward in a vicious, underhanded blow that caught Danny flush on the jaw. The cheap shot came without warning, launched while Danny's hands were down in a gesture of respect. The impact sent Danny staggering backward, blood trickling from his mouth, more shocked by the betrayal than hurt by the punch. The gym erupted in outrage. Mickey leaped to his feet screaming protests, while Bobby Chin immediately moved to disqualify Kellerman. But the champions team was already rushing the ring, claiming victory before any official decision could be made. "Knockout," Kellerman shouted, his arms raised in triumph. "The old man's done." Crystal immediately began live streaming, spinning the narrative before witnesses could process what had actually happened. Her camera focused on Danny's bloody mouth, while carefully avoiding the context of how he'd been struck. The cheap shot had landed, but it revealed more about Kellerman's character than Danny's vulnerability. The education had taken a dark turn. Kellerman's entourage swarmed the ring like locusts, transforming a moment of dishonor into manufactured triumph. Larry immediately began working his phone, coordinating the narrative while Crystal live-streamed the victory to thousands of followers hungry for content. "That's how a real champion handles business," Kellerman announced to Crystal's camera, flexing over Danny, who was being helped to his feet by Eddie. Old-school movie fighting meets new-school reality. The footage was edited in real time, social media algorithms spreading carefully curated clips that showed only Kellerman's punch landing and Danny falling back. The cheap shot disappeared in the editing, replaced by a narrative of aging movie star getting humbled by legitimate athlete. Within minutes, the story exploded across platforms. Boxing champion destroys aging action star. Reality beats Hollywood. When movies meet real fighting. Comments poured in from keyboard warriors celebrating the supposed exposure of fake martial arts by real fighting. Eddie helped Danny from the ring, both men disgusted not by the physical blow, but by the corruption of everything they'd tried to accomplish. The longtime boxing fans in attendance protested loudly, but their voices were drowned out by Kellerman's celebration and the social media circus. I tried to teach him honor, Danny said quietly as Eddie examined his split lip. Instead, I learned something about myself. I've been away from the world too long. Mickey approached, his weathered face twisted with rage. That wasn't fighting, that was assault. Everyone here saw what really happened. But reality had already been rewritten. Kellerman's team controlled the narrative, and in the age of viral content, the first story told became the only story that mattered. News outlets picked up the social media clips, adding their own sensational commentary about has-been celebrities and the harsh reality of professional combat. The gym gradually emptied, leaving only the old-timers and Danny's students, people who understood what they'd witnessed but lacked the platform to correct the record. Danny sat quietly with Eddie as the chaos swirled around them, not nursing physical wounds, but spiritual ones. He'd stepped into the light to defend dignity, only to watch honor itself be edited out of existence. The cheap shot had won more than just a fight. It had stolen the truth. Sunday morning brought global humiliation, delivered through glowing screens. The doctored footage had spread worldwide overnight, turning Danny into a cautionary tale about aging action stars who couldn't separate movies from reality. News outlets ran segments with sensational headlines, while social media experts dissected what went wrong when Hollywood met authentic athleticism. Kellerman appeared on morning talk shows, spinning his narrative with practiced ease. "Look, I respect the guy's movie career," he told a smiling host, "but this is real life. Real fighting." He challenged me, and he learned the difference between choreographed stunts and actual combat. The edited clips played endlessly, Danny appearing to attack aggressively, Kellerman defending himself, the knockout punch landing cleanly. The respectful early rounds disappeared, the cheap shot vanished, and the teaching moments became reframed as an old man's delusions being corrected by reality. Danny's reputation took a beating from armchair experts who'd never thrown a punch. In anger, comment sections filled with mockery about outdated movie fighting and questions about whether his film career had ever been legitimate. The narrative became unstoppable. Past his prime celebrity gets reality check from real athlete. Eddie found Danny in his modest apartment, not nursing physical injuries, but wrestling with deeper wounds. The split lip had healed, but the assault on everything he'd tried to represent still burned. Had he been naive to think honor could survive in today's world? "They're saying you were never really a fighter," Eddie said, showing Danny his phone. "That it was all movie magic." "Maybe they're right." Danny's voice carried exhaustion. "Maybe I've been living in the past, thinking the old ways still mattered." But Eddie scrolled deeper, finding different voices buried beneath the noise. True martial artists worldwide were posting their own videos, frame-by-frame breakdowns showing the cheap shot. Longtime boxing fans defended Danny's honor, calling out the dishonest editing. Masters of various fighting disciplines spoke up, recognizing authentic skill when they saw it. "The real fight isn't over," Eddie told him. "People who understand honor are watching. They know what really happened." Danny looked at the messages of support, fewer in number, but deeper in understanding. Perhaps the lesson wasn't about changing everyone's mind, but about standing up for those who still believed in doing things the right way. Monday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor to Danny's Wing Chun studio. Vincent Romano, 85. Years old and moving with the careful dignity of someone who'd promoted fights for Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard, climbed the stairs with purpose that belied his age. "Mr. Yen," Romano said, settling into a chair with the authority of boxing royalty. "I've been in this business for 60 years. I know a cheap shot when I see one." Danny continued teaching his class, but listened as Romano outlined his proposition. The legendary promoter had watched the fight footage carefully, spotted the dishonest editing immediately, and wanted to offer something unprecedented: a legitimate, sanctioned exhibition match in 1 week at the Chicago Theater's event space. Proper ring, licensed officials, regulated conditions where no tricks are possible, Romano explained. Winner takes $100,000 to charity. But more importantly, both men's reputations get settled definitively. Danny's students paused, their forms understanding the significance. This wasn't just about vindication, it was about giving truth a chance to compete with fiction on equal terms. Kellerman can't refuse without admitting he only won through cheating, Romano continued. And you get a chance to restore your honor under fair conditions. The whole world will be watching this time. Danny initially declined, not wanting to feed the spectacle further. But Romano's next words stopped him cold. Sometimes doing the right thing requires stepping back into the light. You taught him a lesson about honor, but the lesson isn't finished. Eddie nodded encouragingly from across the studio. The old veteran understood that some battles couldn't be won by walking away. They required standing up when it mattered most. The terms, Danny asked, professional exhibition, 8 3-minute rounds, neutral officials, live global broadcast. No editing, no tricks, no excuses. Just truth. Danny looked at his students, then at Eddie, seeing reflection of his own values in their faces. Honor wasn't about hiding from challenges. It was about meeting them with dignity and tact. Set it. Up, Danny said quietly. Romano smiled, reaching for his phone. Time to teach the world what real fighting looks like. The real fight was about to begin. Tuesday morning marked the beginning of Danny's most serious training regimen in years. With only 1 week until the sanctioned exhibition, every moment counted. Eddie arrived at the Golden Gloves gym before dawn, transforming from janitor to full-time corner man with the dedication of someone who understood the stakes extended far beyond personal vindication. Their training sessions became masterclasses in preparation. Danny's flowing Wing Chun movements merged seamlessly with Eddie's old-school boxing wisdom, ring generalship, rhythm, and the psychological warfare that separated good fighters from great ones. The combination was poetry, ancient martial arts principles guided by Depression-era boxing intelligence. You've got the skill, Eddie said, watching Danny work the heavy bag with surgical precision. But this time, he'll be ready for your style. He spent a week studying every move you made. Through their conversations between rounds, the full scope of Danny's retreat from public life emerged. Maria's death 5 years ago, the car accident on a rainy Chicago night, Danny driving home from a charity event, the truck that ran the red light. Though the police report cleared him completely, guilt had driven him from the spotlight into teaching, seeking redemption through helping others rather than entertaining millions. Honor isn't about personal guilt, Eddie counseled, holding the heavy bag as Danny demonstrated combination techniques. It's about standing up when it matters. You can't save Maria by hiding from the world, but you can honor her memory by fighting for what's right. Other gym regulars stopped their own training to watch the preparation. Word had spread through Chicago's tight-knit boxing community. The legendary Donnie Yen was training for real, and the old-timers wanted to witness history. Mickey provided running commentary, explaining techniques to younger fighters who'd never seen traditional martial arts applied at this level. By week's end, Danny had regained his fighting edge while maintaining his philosophical center. His timing was razor-sharp, his conditioning peaked, but more importantly, his purpose had crystallized. This wasn't about revenge or ego. It was about proving that honor could still triumph over deception. Friday evening, Eddie presented Danny with a gift wrapped in old newspaper. His own boxing gloves from 1952, the leather worn smooth by decades of storage but still proud. For luck and for honor, Eddie said. Danny accepted them reverently, understanding the significance of the gesture. Saturday evening transformed the Chicago theater's adjacent event space into a cathedral of combat sports. Professional lighting illuminated a regulation ring surrounded by 2,000 seats filled with the most diverse crowd in boxing history. Longtime fight fans, martial arts enthusiasts, celebrities, and global viewers watching via live stream. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation, but carried the respectful weight of legitimate sport rather than circus spectacle. This wasn't entertainment. It was resolution, witnessed by the world. Kellerman arrived with his full team, but the mood had shifted dramatically from their gym entrance weeks earlier. His week of preparation had been intensive, studying footage of Danny's films and their first encounter, developing specific counter-strategies for the fluid defensive movement that had embarrassed him before. Pete had drilled combinations designed to cut off ring movement, while Larry worked with sports psychologists to prepare Kellerman mentally for facing someone who'd thoroughly outclassed him. The camp understood they couldn't rely on tricks or lucky shots. This would require every ounce of skill Kellerman possessed. He's older, he's been out of real competition for years, Pete reminded his fighter during final preparations. Your conditioning, your power, your youth, use everything. The contrast in entrances told the story of two different approaches to combat. Kellerman emerged in flashy gear covered with corporate sponsors, his team surrounding him like a small army. The crowd's reception was mixed. Cheers from those who believed the media narrative, boos from those who understood what had really happened in their first encounter. Danny's entrance embodied understated elegance. He wore simple black shorts and Eddie's vintage 1952 gloves, walking to the ring with quiet dignity, accompanied only by the old veteran. The martial arts community worldwide had flown representatives to witness this moment. Masters from Hong Kong, Brazil, Japan, all understanding they were watching something historic. The standing ovation that greeted Danny's appearance lasted 3 full minutes. Thousands of people showing respect for someone who'd spent decades representing their art with honor. He acknowledged the crowd with a slight bow, then focused entirely on the task ahead. Both fighters were introduced to thunderous applause, but the atmosphere remained respectful rather than bloodthirsty. This wasn't about destruction, it was about truth. The opening bell rang for what would become a masterpiece of professional combat sports. Both fighters immediately demonstrated they'd arrived prepared for war, but war conducted with skill rather than savagery. Kellerman boxed intelligently from the first exchange, using his reach advantage effectively while showing dramatically improved defensive awareness. His jab found rhythm, his footwork showed purpose, and his combinations displayed actual craft rather than the wild aggression that had defined their first encounter. Danny responded with the full spectrum of his abilities, Wing Chun techniques, blended seamlessly with boxing fundamentals, creating a unique fighting style that was both beautiful and devastatingly effective. His defensive mastery remained absolute, but now he engaged more aggressively, showing the global audience what authentic martial arts looked like under pressure. The first 2 rounds showcased the highest level of technical skill Kellerman had clearly learned from their previous meeting, boxing with discipline and respect while maintaining his natural power advantage. Danny acknowledged this improvement by fighting more openly, allowing genuine exchanges that displayed both men's abilities. Beautiful boxing, Romano murmured from ringside, watching 2 different fighting philosophies merge into something approaching art. The crowd appreciated the technical excellence on display. This wasn't brutality masked as sport, but genuine athletic competition at its finest. Between rounds, both corners worked with focused intensity. Pete's instructions to Kellerman were tactical and specific, while Eddie's advice to Danny remained philosophical. Fight your fight, not his. Honor the art. Round 3 continued the high-level competition, with both fighters earning the crowd's respect through their skill and sportsmanship. Kellerman landed clean shots through proper technique rather than cheap tactics, while Danny's counters demonstrated why traditional martial arts had survived for centuries. The judges' scorecards showed a competitive fight, but those who understood combat sports recognized the deeper truth. Danny was controlling every aspect of the bout while allowing Kellerman to perform at his best. The education was continuing, but now it was being broadcast to millions. As they touched gloves to start round 4, both fighters showed mutual respect earned through combat. The real test was still coming. Round 4 began with continued high-level boxing, but as the fight progressed, subtle changes emerged in Kellerman's approach. When clean boxing wasn't providing the decisive advantage his ego demanded, old habits began to resurface like stains bleeding through fresh paint. The regression started small. An elbow held slightly too long in the clinch, a low blow disguised as a body shot, holding and hitting when the referee's position obscured the foul. Experienced referee Jimmy Martinez issued warnings, but Kellerman persisted, his respect for the art dissolving under pressure. Danny recognized the deterioration. Immediately, the man he'd been educating was reverting to type, choosing shortcuts over skill when faced with genuine challenge. The philosophical implications were devastating. Some people couldn't be taught honor. They could only reveal their true nature. Under stress, the crowd sensed the shift, their appreciation for competitive excellence curdling into disappointment as Kellerman's tactics became increasingly questionable. This wasn't the evolution they'd hoped to witness, but devolution in real time. When Donnie countered with a perfect three-punch combination that visibly shook Kellerman, the champion lost his composure completely. During the next break in action, both fighters separated naturally, and Kellerman extended his glove as if to touch Donnie's in a show of respect. Donnie, still believing in the possibility of redemption, lowered his guard and reached out to acknowledge the gesture. It was the same moment of trust that had been violated in their first encounter, but Donnie chose to believe people could change. Kellerman's right hand exploded upward in the identical cheap shot that had won their first fight. A vicious, underhanded blow launched while Donnie's hands were extended in sportsmanship. But this time, Donnie was ready. His left hand shot out with lightning precision, catching Kellerman's wrist mid-punch and stopping the blow completely. The attempted cheap shot froze in mid-air as Donnie's grip locked around Kellerman's forearm like a steel trap. The arena fell silent as Donnie looked directly into Kellerman's eyes, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the venue. "I gave you a chance to be better. You chose to remain small." The moment crystallized everything. Honor confronting dishonor, growth meeting stagnation, truth facing down deception before thousands of witnesses and millions of global viewers. The real fight was about to begin. Donnie released Kellerman's wrist and stepped back, his movement deliberate and controlled. The failed cheap shot had been exposed before thousands of witnesses and millions of global viewers. There could be no editing, no narrative manipulation, no escape from truth this time. Kellerman's face flushed with rage and humiliation as he realized his signature tactic had been neutralized completely. The arena buzzed with tension as spectators understood they were witnessing a defining moment, not just of the fight, but of character itself. "Fight me like a man," Donnie said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of disappointed expectation. "Show them what you could be instead of what you've chosen to remain." But Kellerman's response revealed the depth of his corruption. Instead of acknowledging the lesson being offered, he attacked with wild, desperate aggression, throwing bombs designed to end the fight through sheer violence rather than skill. His combinations lacked artistry, driven by fury rather than technique. This was when Donnie unleashed the full scope of his abilities. What followed wasn't brutality but artistry, a 3-minute masterpiece of martial arts philosophy made manifest. Wing Chun traps flowed seamlessly into boxing combinations, defensive movements transformed into offensive opportunities, and footwork that made Kellerman appear stationary despite his desperate mobility. Every technique told a story. A perfect trap encounter demonstrated why meeting force with force was futile. A sweep illustrated the importance of balance in all things. Combinations that began with classical Wing Chun centerline theory finished with boxing fundamentals, showing how traditional wisdom enhanced rather than competed with modern application. The crowd watched in reverent silence as Donnie dismantled not just Kellerman's offense, but his entire philosophy of strength through intimidation. Each exchange showed the difference between power and skill, between aggression and controlled violence, between fighting and combat. That Kellerman's conditioning began to fail under the relentless pressure of perfection. His punches became slower, his defense more porous, his movement increasingly desperate. But more devastating than physical exhaustion was the psychological realization that he was facing not just a better fighter, but a superior human being. The combination of technical mastery and moral authority overwhelmed Kellerman completely. He began to understand that this wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about confronting the difference between who he was and who he could have become. As the round progressed, Kellerman's aggression transformed into something approaching panic. He was being systematically educated in front of the world, and no amount of rage could bridge the gap between his limitations and Donnie's mastery. The lesson was reaching its inevitable conclusion. Round 7 opened with Kellerman defenseless in every way that mattered. His physical skills remained, but his will to continue the dishonest tactics had been broken by the previous round's systematic dismantling. He moved like a man carrying the weight of his own moral failures. Donnie had achieved complete dominance, technical, physical, and psychological. Kellerman stood before him beaten not just as a fighter, but as a man who'd chosen the wrong path repeatedly when offered alternatives. The arena held its breath, waiting for the inevitable conclusion. The knockout opportunity presented itself perfectly. Kellerman's guard dropped from exhaustion and defeat, his chin exposed, his balance compromised. Danny had every justification for delivering a devastating finishing blow, retribution for the humiliation of Eddie, justice for the cheap shots, vindication for everyone who'd been bulldozed by entitled arrogance. The crowd anticipated explosive violence. Kellerman's own corner expected annihilation. The global audience waited for the moment when accumulated disrespect would be answered with overwhelming force. Instead, Danny stepped back and extended his gloved hand. The gesture stunned everyone, offering help to someone who'd tried to cheat him twice, showing mercy to a man who'd shown none to others. It was the ultimate demonstration of the principles Danny had tried to teach. True strength served justice, not vengeance. But Kellerman, overwhelmed by the demonstration of skill and the mercy being shown, couldn't accept the lesson. Desperation and wounded pride drove him to swing one final time. Not from malice, but from the terrible recognition that he'd been offered redemption and proven unworthy of it. Danny's response was immediate and definitive. His right hand traveled 6 inches with perfect economy of motion, carrying 40 years of martial arts mastery, decades of film work, and most importantly, the accumulated wisdom of someone who understood that some lessons could only be taught through decisive action. The straight punch was poetry written in violence, technically perfect, morally justified, and beautiful in its simplicity. Every principle of Wing Chun's centerline theory combined with boxing fundamentals, delivered with just enough force to end the fight cleanly without causing lasting damage. Kellerman's eyes widened in the split second before impact, finally understanding the true scope of what he'd challenged. The punch landed with surgical precision, dropping him backward in a graceful arc that Danny controlled even in the moment of victory. The knockout was clean, decisive, and merciful, everything Kellerman's approach to combat was not. As the champion fell, Danny immediately stepped forward to support his descent, ensuring he landed safely despite being unconscious. The arena erupted in appreciation for witnessing not just a knockout, but a masterpiece of martial arts philosophy, made manifest through controlled violence in service of justice. Kellerman regained consciousness to find Danny kneeling beside him, checking his condition with the care of someone who understood that even defeated opponents deserved dignity. The contrast was stark. The man who'd shown mercy helping the man who'd tried to cheat, honor caring for dishonor even in the moment of complete victory. A.S. Kellerman sat up slowly. His eyes met Danny's with a clarity that had been absent throughout their encounters. The fog of arrogance and entitlement had been lifted by the precision of that final punch, leaving behind something approaching wisdom. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Kellerman understood the difference between strength and bullying, between winning and succeeding. "I'm sorry," Kellerman said. "Think he'll really stay changed?" Eddie asked, watching Kellerman work patiently with a teenage fighter who reminded them both of the champion's former arrogance. Danny smiled, his voice carrying the contentment of someone who'd found his purpose. "Again, everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were yesterday. Sometimes it just takes someone willing to show them the way." The camera pulled back to reveal the scene in full. The gym below filled with students of all ages learning, not just to fight, but to live with honor, respect, and dignity. The story ended with the understanding that true victory wasn't about defeating opponents, but about lifting everyone up to be their best selves. A lesson that would echo through generations of fighters yet to come. 1 year later, the Golden Gloves Gym hosted its first annual Honor in Combat exhibition, drawing fighters and martial artists from around the world. The event wasn't about determining winners and losers, but celebrating the principles that made combat sports noble: respect, discipline, and the responsibility that came with strength. Danny stood ringside as his students demonstrated traditional Wing Chun forms alongside Kellerman's boxing protégés, showing how different fighting styles could coexist when guided by shared values. The crowd included familiar faces: Mickey Torino calling play-by-play with his usual gruff wisdom, Vincent Romano serving as honorary referee despite his advanced age, and Crystal Adams, now documenting stories of redemption rather than manufactured drama. The evening's highlight came when Eddie, now 73 but moving with renewed purpose, stepped into the ring wearing his 1952 Golden Gloves jacket. The crowd rose in thunderous applause as he presented awards not for athletic achievement, but for character demonstrated through combat sports. Real champions, Eddie announced, his voice carrying clearly through the arena, are measured not by their wins and losses, but by how they treat others when they think no one's watching. Kellerman received the evening's highest honor, the Transformation Award, for becoming the kind of man his younger self would have mocked. As he accepted the trophy, his words carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. "A year ago, I thought strength meant taking what you wanted," he said. "These two men taught me that real strength means lifting others up." The celebration continued late into the night, but eventually the gym emptied except for three figures sharing quiet conversation in the ring where it all began: Danny, Eddie, and Marcus, teacher, elder, and student, representing the eternal cycle of growth that made their sport sacred. Outside, Chicago slept peacefully, unaware that in one corner of the city, the old ways lived on, passed from hand to hand, heart to heart, generation to generation. The story was complete, but the legacy would continue forever. If you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.